So we have a winning comment to get this latest 49ers show started off. It's from Ryan Coe. Every time I think David is taking a break for the offseason, he sets up another live stream. Truer words have never been spoken. I know there is not going to be a break here. I'm going to power through this. I found my rest in other ways here over the last 24 hours or so, but I think we did a live yesterday evening. Then I got on a plane. I reached my destination. Yes, I did clear the upgrade. First class yesterday. Maybe we should get the first class food up on the screen. I was impressed with United. They have improved their food offering. We got a nice little pasta with some goat cheese in it in first class, and it was good. And then I had to sleep because it was a red eye. And then I woke up and had some lunch and worked on the studio. Look, we're back in the old spot. The Frank Gore jersey's here for the offseason. There's going to be other stuff that we're adding to the 49ers offering over this offseason. So buckle your seatbelts for that. But I was working on the studio in the afternoon, and then I had dinner, and then I said, okay, it's time to talk football because I understand that people are probably having withdrawals at this point. It is 9:36 p.m. Central Time, so that means 7:30 Pacific, and that means that at this time last week, the 49ers were just about to lose the Super Bowl. Right around right now, I think overtime was probably happening. So it's only been a week, and it's going to take a lot longer than a week to recover. I talked so much over the past 7 days about the scene in the locker room, just so much despair and the emotions and the visceral feeling of that defeat. And obviously since then, we've had so many ridiculous takes, people trying to process this game, people trying to capitalize on, real fans' desire to and need to process the game by just putting out ridiculous clickbait stuff, some theories that you only get after a team loses a Super Bowl. There's been some really off the wall type of stuff, but at the end of the day, we're only a week removed from the big loss, and the 49ers are, I guarantee you, still picking up the pieces. I would expect a lot of players, though, to start working out again starting tomorrow on Monday, because you can't sit around forever, right? Especially when you've played a 20-game season and your final game is in mid-February. All of a sudden, the offseason program is right on you, just like that. Kind of like me right now. I can't take that big of a break because the NFL Combine is next week. A week from now, I'm going to be traveling to Indianapolis to cover the Combine. And a week from, prior to where we are right now, I was covering the Super Bowl. So there's only 2 weeks in between the Super Bowl and the NFL Combine. If you are one of the two teams that goes the very distance, sorry, you just don't get much of a break, and you're going to have to recalibrate on the fly. So that's what the 49ers are going to be tasked with doing. That's what I'm doing. And the comment from Ryan Coe, every time that I think that David is going to be taking a break, he sets up another live stream. That's because we have a lot to talk about. It's going to be a fascinating season in free agency, by the way, which starts in less than a month. Brian Burns is a player who 49ers fans have had their eyes on for quite some time now. Carolina edge rusher, 250-pounder. So he plays a little bit more from the speed aspect of the edge rushing position, has tremendous athleticism, has been stuck on a really bad team. There's been that whole joke. Well, the 49ers saved Christian McCaffrey from Carolina. Can they save Brian Burns next? And it's unlikely because the guy is 25 years old. He's a young, promising edge rusher who's been marooned out on that Carolina island. The 49ers obviously could use a good edge rusher to pair with Nick Bosa to put under contract for next season because Chase Young's contract is expiring. I just think that Chase Young is probably going to be a whole lot more affordable than somebody like Brian Burns, who is very much still in the prime of his career. Young is not old by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not so sure that we've seen the same Chase Young consistently on a down-in, down-out basis after his very severe knee injury as we did before it. Now, the 49ers were generally happy with the bookending presence that Chase Young gave them, but I will be the first to point out that it wasn't a stellar pass rushing production type of situation opposite of Bosa. Young was right in the middle of the pack, edge rushing wise. I thought that he was better on some plays than he was on others. I think that there was there was an inconsistency there in production from him, which is probably something that you would expect from somebody who went through as severe of a knee injury as he did. I think that the effort play against the Lions where Jahmyr Gibbs scored the touchdown, I think that one is being blown way out of proportion. You don't expect the backside defensive end to make that tackle. Was it a bad look? Of course. Do the 49ers, have they talked openly about wanting more effort on that play? Of course. But Chase Young's value on the market is not going to be determined by that. It's going to be determined by how well he can get down in a three-point stance and rush the passer. That's what edge rushers do. That's what they're paid to do. And Chase Young probably made himself some money in the Super Bowl. When he blew by Donovan Smith on that early sack, I mean, that was vintage Chase Young. It looked like I was watching him in 2020. Remember, he had that huge game against the 49ers in Arizona when San Francisco was hosting games at State Farm Stadium and Washington came over there. I think Young had a fumble 6 or a strip sack touchdown, something like that. I mean, he was a monster in that game. And the speed and the power, the combination of both coming off the edge, that was really something to watch. Everybody's saying, oh, here's the next Bosa coming up under the Larry Johnson system a year later. Look out for Chase Young, defensive rookie of the year in 2020. But then he suffered that severe knee injury. And I don't think that he's been the same player since then. He actually returned against the 49ers last season when Washington visited Levi's Stadium. And obviously that was his very, very first action after the severe injury and the layoff. So didn't expect to see much from him then, but it just gives you an idea of how much time this guy missed. It was his trajectory was a lot like Nick Bosa's in that he won that defensive rookie of the year. And then he got hurt in year 2. But unfortunately for Chase Young, he got hurt much later in year 2 than Nick Bosa did. If you're going to have a serious knee injury in year 2 of your NFL career, you'd actually rather have it sooner in the year. So that way the lingering after effects are mostly gone by the start of your year 3. For Chase Young, the after effects were still there in year 3 in 2022 to the point where he couldn't return until week 15. And we've got our first extended look back at Chase Young after the injury this past season. And the pass rush productivity score was decent for Washington. Then they traded him to the 49ers, but there were some complaints about effort and run defense coming from the Commanders. With the 49ers, I do feel that there was an inconsistency to Chase Young's play, but an absolute turning of the switch when the moment meant the most in the Super Bowl that has the 49ers thinking that he could be a very valuable member of this team next season. And, one thing in defense of Chase Young, I would say that it's likely that the further away he gets from that injury, because there were some complications to his ACL tear, to that knee injury. I think the further removed he is from it, the better football player as far as consistency goes he can be, because he's still young. We talk about Brian Burns being 25 years old, but Chase Young, I mean, you look at Chase Young, and I mean, his last name says it. He's young. But you look at Chase Young, and this is a player that was still on the physical upswing. He's 24. The player that was still on the physical upswing at the time that he suffered his knee injury. And if you're going to determine whether or not you want to pay this guy, that's something that you've got to factor in. For comparison, Dre Greenlaw, who tore his Achilles, he's 26. So Greenlaw, a couple years older than Chase Young, year and a half probably. That's probably the cutoff for the comfort zone with which you can expect the player to be able to truly bounce back from a major injury with at least something close to his full speed and explosiveness. I don't think you want a guy to be much older than 27 or 28 years old. So Greenlaw, 26, Chase Young, who did some good stuff in that Super Bowl for the 49ers this past season, who did some good stuff. I mean, I think back to week 10 against Jacksonville. I think to the 5-man front the 49ers ran. I think back to him and Nick Bosa saying, let's meet at the quarterback. And then they did against Trevor Lawrence against Jacksonville. I mean, you go back to week 1 of this 2023 season. The 49ers had Drake Jackson opposite Nick Bosa, and Jackson had 3 sacks in that game. But it wasn't like he was overpowering tackle and, running the hoop or pancaking guys on his way to the quarterback. There were 3 cleanup crew sacks. There were 3 effort sacks for him, but still the fact that the 49ers had a book-ending edge rusher deliver in that week 1 game, I think really was important early on as Nick Bosa was just coming back off of the layoff from holding out. Jackson obviously flamed out this season, had the knee injury that required surgery. Getting Chase Young to be that boost that they enjoyed in week 10 in Jacksonville was really, really important. Even if the play was inconsistent beyond then, the 49ers needed that boost. And it just went to, really illustrate how important having those bookending edge rushers is. As far as Brian Burns goes of the Carolina Panthers, I'm just sitting here wondering why Carolina is such a poor franchise. They don't just pay the guy. I think he had 9 sacks this past season on obviously a terrible team. He's a premier guy coming off of the edge. The 49ers would, and other teams would all love if he actually hit free agency. But I think that Carolina would have to be completely incompetent to allow that to happen. You have so many other recourses at your disposal. Even if you don't want to keep somebody like Brian Burns, you can lay the franchise tag on him and trade him. So the tag and trade, which obviously would require some significant draft capital going Carolina's way. Only an absolutely inept franchise would let somebody like Brian Burns walk out of that building for at most a 3rd-round compensatory pick in 2025. But hey, if he somehow is on the market, if somehow the trade market is feasible for him, the 49ers need a bookend for Nick Bosa, with Chase Young not under contract for next season. And I think that Chase is somebody where you listen to Nick Bosa talk. He says he definitely wants Chase Young back. So he might have been a polarizing player. And regarding the effort issues and obviously regarding probably some expectations that weren't fully met because people thought, oh, automatically this is going to be Rookie of the Year, Chase Young. Despite any warped expectations, this is still what the 49ers feel is above replacement level pass rusher who can give the 49ers some seismic snaps like he did in the Super Bowl that can really make opponents worry about both lines of scrimmage. And I think for that reason, this free agency period is going to be fascinating. All right, we're going to move this to a 49ers Q&A. I could talk about Brian Burns. I could talk about Chase Young. Obviously, we know nothing at this point. The 49ers probably don't know a whole lot at this point either about how this is probably going to play out because it's February 18th. That's less than a month away from the official start of free agency. So I'm ready for your questions here. Let's have some fun. No, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue generating that 49ers content. So we got Red and Gold saying that he'd pass on Young all day. I think it really is a matter of price. When I talk about the 49ers salary structure, they are right around what the cap should be. We don't know what the cap is going to be yet after you carry over the $38 million from 2023. The big inflection point is looming next season. That's with Brock Purdy, because Brock Purdy is probably going to get paid next season. And that's when, oh boy, you better tighten your belt with the rest of the roster. But my thinking is if the 49ers, they were so adamant on adding an edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa this year so they could pursue a title with legitimacy. So they went out there and they traded for Randy Gregory. They traded for Chase Young. Both of those guys pending free agents, but a team that was that serious about adding that second edge rusher and that did benefit from that second edge rusher. You can't pretend that Young and Randy Gregory were empty-handed in the Super Bowl. Those guys both made some big plays, but a team that's taken that position as seriously as the 49ers are, I think that it's something that they'll address this offseason. I don't know if Chase Young is going to be within their budget. I would almost assume that somebody like Brian Burns would not be within their budget, but it's going to be worth finding out if you're the 49ers because it is a value position. When is Greenlaw expected back? Well, there is no firm timetable yet, but I do know that Achilles injuries, they talk about 6 to 9 months, and he just had surgery this past week. This is a good question. Are there any Deebo Samuel style prospects the 49ers might look at in the draft? I would just have to say no. There are physical receivers, and I'll delve into this when we go through position by position. But I want to answer this question in general. I'm not sure there's a player like Deebo Samuel in NFL history. The combination that he brings, the power backs mentality combined with obviously breakaway speed, that's unique. And that's why Deebo Samuel's not just some trade candidate for the 49ers. He brings a seismic and unique skill set to the table that can play both receiver and running back. We have no idea what players like Brendan Rice are going to get what round these guys are going to go in. The draft is a crapshoot. Maybe that's the grade on Jerry Rice's son as of right now, but let's just hold tight. I hate speculating about the draft ahead of time because it's a lot of people talking about stuff they cannot possibly know. How do the 49ers address the safety position this offseason with Tashaun Gipson probably leaving? I'm not sure if he's leaving. He's going to be 34 years old. He might retire. John Lynch mentioned the other day that this guy doesn't ever seem to fall off. Like they keep on waiting for him to fall off, but he hasn't. So the 49ers have stopped waiting for that. Talanoa Hufanga should be back from the ACL. That's an injury that it's theoretically easier to come back from that than the torn Achilles. So you've got Hufanga on one side for the 49ers, and you got Jair Brown on the other side, who's been a promising addition after his rookie season. So you want to fortify the safety depth as much as possible, but you do already have two starting level names. That being said, the uncertainty regarding Hufanga's return, because you should never be sure following an ACL, makes me think that the 49ers are going to want to make sure that there's some insurance at the safety position. And remember that Tashaun Gipson first joined this team as insurance when Jimmy Ward had the pulled hamstring in the training camp of 2022. And Gipson has just stuck around for longer than anyone could have possibly expected. So now entering age 34, the guy with 33 career interceptions, maybe he wants to keep playing. Maybe the 49ers will say, hey, minimum deal, we'll bring you back because we've got uncertainty at that safety position. That's why some people are saying, I think the 49ers want Gipson back. Gipson allowed a passer rating of 72.7 into his coverage this year, which was number 12 out of about 60 qualifying safeties as a 33-year-old. 33 picks, right place, right time kind of guy, strips the ball away from Jahmyr Gibbs at a big moment in the NFC Championship game. The one play that he did screw up on is when he lost that ball in the lights, right? As he was trying to cover the deep pass from Patrick Mahomes. 49ers got bailed out on the very next play when Deommodore Lenoir made an amazing strip. But that one before, that was a good example of pass defense gone awry for Tashaun Gipson. But there hadn't been all too much of that. He has rated well in pass defense for the 49ers. Tyler, the wise guy, is talking about potential 49ers restructures. He says they can save over $15 million by restructuring Deebo Samuel. I'm not sure if that's the exact amount because they've already restructured him, but there might be that kind of room. I have to go look. If they choose to extend Charvarius Ward, I think that's a more likely thing. Ward is entering the final year of his contract. Maybe you could give him a new signing bonus, redo his deal along the way. Eric Armstead, I'm not sure if they're going to extend Eric Armstead. And Dre, I don't know if they're going to be extending a player who's coming off an Achilles tear. So a lot of this stuff, yes, they're going to run some financial Tetris. They're going to run some restructures. That's going to help them be able to fit who they need to fit. But when you look at your little outline here, some of this stuff is just not likely. You're not going to extend somebody like Dre Greenlaw before he proves that he's come back from his Achilles tear. So maybe, just maybe, you go out there and you double down on some restructures. You've already redone deals for guys like Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. You can double down again if you feel they're going to be part of your core for a while. But it might not be something that the 49ers do just because of that, just because there already has been so much focus on that core with these restructures. And for good reason. These guys are the core. They're still playing well. But at some point, you want to stop pushing all this money into the future because you don't want to end up like the 49ers of the early 2000s. Chris Conley is a free agent. I guess it's not surprising that a Chiefs fan is asking about Chris Conley, who that was a team that drafted Chris Conley, played really, really well in the Super Bowl. A couple of those punts he downed deep in Kansas City territory. He's been a revelation for the 49ers on special teams. Robert Beal is not going to move the linebacker next to Fred Warner unless the 49ers move to some kind of 4-3, 3-4 from their 4-3. Robert Beal's a pass rusher, and that's totally fine with the 49ers. You'd be veering into Steve Wilks territory if you're trying to make Robert Beal an actual stack linebacker, and that didn't work out. Wilks saw the game differently. They were never able to assimilate what he brought to the table from his cerebral command of the game with what the 49ers were at their core. And I think that Robert Beal at his core is a pass rusher. He's not going to be a Fred Warner-like off-ball linebacker. Who should the 49ers sign in free agency for quarterback 2? Well, if Sam Darnold's not available, if he prices himself out of the 49ers market, you could always go get Jimmy Garoppolo. He might be the reputation repair quarterback that would need the 49ers more than they needed him this year. All jokes aside, let's see who becomes available. I think the days of the 49ers just riding on somebody like Brandon Allen or somebody relatively anonymous at that QB position, the backup QB spot, are over. I think they were sufficiently scarred by the NFC Championship game injuries against Philadelphia. So let's just wait and see if they can get Sam Darnold back, but I would expect a higher upside backup for Brock Purdy. I don't think they're going to go with the status quo. I think that memory from the NFC title game in Philly just a couple of years ago is still all too fresh in the 49ers' minds. Would Wilks still be with the Niners if they won the Super Bowl? I don't think so. I think that this went back all the way to week 7 and 8 when they got absolutely lit up by Minnesota, Kirk Cousins, and Cincinnati, Joe Burrow. I mean, it was brutal. Kyle Shanahan openly called Steve Wilks out for his cover 0 call against Jordan Addison and Kirk Cousins in week 8. Then Kyle Shanahan, after week 9, where the 49ers lost at home to the Cincinnati Bengals, moved Steve Wilks down to the field from the booth. He literally moved him. He said, no, you can't coach from where you said you wanted to coach. I'm taking over now. That relationship was obviously just never a great fit. And now you got people who didn't watch the 49ers all year parachuting in and having their takes on a situation that they do not understand. I don't think that Steve Wilks would have remained the defensive coordinator, even if the 49ers won the Super Bowl. If they had won, they probably would have to draft a better press release. They probably would have had to have been a little bit more dainty about it. They could have, said that it was in the interest of both sides, a mutual parting, if you will. But the fact that, this happened earlier, that the 49ers lost the NFC, but they lost the Super Bowl after losing that NFC Championship game in terms of schematics in the first half. I mean, you saw the Lions just run roughshod over Steve Wilks' defense. It just tells me that this is something that Kyle Shanahan has had to have been thinking of for a while. And I think everything that he said in the media, the intonation of stuff, the flow of conversations has seemed to corroborate that. And Wilks it seemed like he made an egregious miscalculation at the end of the Super Bowl. This much is right. Guys, I have to get some water. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put Lombardi will be right back. I'm going to put this up on the screen as I get some water. And I'm going to put up the 90-man depth chart for this 2024 season onto the screen for you so you can go ahead and check it out while I take my quick little break here to get some water. Here you go. Talk to you in a second. All right, we are back. Center ourselves. Cheers to you. Water is here. Margot is not. Guess where Margot is? New York City. Crazy. Not really. She's there for a couple days. She's going to be back tomorrow. So I beat her home, and it's no longer be right back. We can talk about Chase Young, Brian Burns, and company, or we can go to 49ers Q&A. Which studio do you like better? Do you like the San Francisco one better, or do you like this one better? I got a little bit more room here. We're working on some surprises too for the studio. this offseason. Mike says, smash that like button. Go ahead and do that. I've seen tape on Rice and McCaffrey's brother. I like both of the siblings. I guess a son and a sibling, right? But I like well, all of the McCaffrey siblings can play. But when you look at Luke, he's a conversion from quarterback to receiver, and that's all the rage in football these days is the ability to see stuff from the QB's perspective, even if you're playing one of the other skill positions. I think that's tremendously invaluable. I think that the 49ers do a lot of this, and I've talked to Brian Fleury, the 49ers tight ends coach. Fleury is a former QB, first of all, Towson University in Maryland. The way that he coaches the tight ends is such that they are drilled to know everything that the quarterback can possibly be thinking. So that way they run their routes from the perspective of the QB. And every little minute detail begins mattering when you start thinking about it in those terms, especially in the short game over the middle where you're going to have very small windows. If a tight end is leaning one way, if he nudges another way, if he reaches one way, where he breaks, where he cuts is going to be really important in terms of depth. And that's going to come down to half a yard, even less is going to be a significant difference. If you can get your tight ends thinking about their route trees in terms of what that QB is going to be considering as he drops back, you're going to be a step ahead as an offense. It's almost mandatory, I think, to have a consistently efficient offense this year. So anyway, with Luke McCaffrey, you've got a former quarterback that's now running some pass patterns, that's obviously playing in that skill position slot. I think that he has a skill set that is very, very favorably paired with what the NFL is looking for these days. Yeah. Latu versus Kittle in training camp. Sure. Latu is obviously going to have to fight to make the 49ers team. He was just dropping everything and then had the knee surgery last training camp. But he gets the red shirt year. Now he comes back as a second-year player, and he's going to have to show that he's learned that the game has slowed down for him, and he's learned how to hold on to the football. Because the guy's a physical force. He's a physical load. He could probably be a really good blocker for the 49ers, but he cannot be a liability in the receiving game. This is a good content idea, a series on advanced stats. The best stats, what they tell us, where to find them, etc. That's really good. And I think that could be something that I do on a more national level, right? I talk about yards per route run. Obviously, the 49ers had a great performer in yards per route run, but so did the Miami Dolphins. Tyreek Hill made history in yards per route run. You can even script these things and make really, really cool videos to show people why you don't just look at raw receiving yardage. If you just looked at raw receiving yardage, you would say, well, this guy has just as many yards as Brandon Ayuk. But Brandon Ayuk had like 60 or 70 fewer targets than a lot of the players that were in Offensive Player of the Year discussions and all-pro discussions alongside him, especially the all-pro and Pro Bowl discussions. There were receivers with 50 to 70 fewer targets. So Ayuk was almost historically high with 18 yards a catch, whereas you had other guys at 13 to 15 yards a catch. Anytime that we look at how good somebody is and we want to put some stats on it, we should look at it from an efficiency standpoint and not a raw yardage standpoint, because if the opportunities are lower, well, that obviously is important context that cannot be left out. Roddy Cal wants the 49ers to bring back Azeez Al-Shaair. It could fit, especially with Dre Greenlaw being in rehab over the course of this offseason. I think that Elijah Mitchell is better than Jordan Mason and Ty Davis Price. And as long as he is, and they have him under a rookie contract, he absolutely has a spot with the 49ers. Now, Mitchell only has one year left on his deal. He played 2021, 2022, and 2023. So 1 year left. I mean, he was the 49ers' best backup running back this season. He's had those injury issues. And the one thing that people are so unfair to Elijah Mitchell, but he came out of college, a smaller school. He played for the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns, and he immediately saw a featured role in the National Football League. People need to realize how hard the NFL is on anybody's body, especially at one of the most violent positions, running back. But it's especially hard for somebody coming out of college at a smaller school where they haven't been dealing with those types of blows yet, and having to acclimate and play in a full-time role, which is what Elijah Mitchell saw as a rookie. He suffered like 6 injuries that year, and he played through them. But it's almost certain in my mind that a lot of the injuries that he suffered were a direct result of the shock of playing at the NFL level for the first time, coming up from the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. So Mitchell, I think, has been hampered for most of his career by the injuries that he suffered when they had to play him so extensively as a rookie. And it really, really goes to prove that you are in a better position as an NFL franchise if you can work guys in gradually as rookies, especially at violent positions like running back. Anyway, we're now entering year 4 of the Elijah Mitchell career, and he's done good stuff for the 49ers in all 3 of the preceding years. Injuries have certainly hurt his progression, but to act like he's not the second best running back on this 49ers team would be disingenuous. He earned his spot over Jordan Mason. He earned his spot over Ty Davis Price. He scored the game-tying touchdown against the Detroit Lions in the NFC Championship game. I mean, he's done some really, really good stuff. And before people are, quick to point fingers about him being injury prone, maybe think about why he might be injury prone and realize that if you put a normal human in a situation, that normal human probably wouldn't survive as a running back in the NFL. But Mitchell is somebody who, as a rookie out of a small school, did take a beating. He helped the 49ers. He contributed big time. But unfortunately, because the beating that he did take, some of the injuries, I think, still linger with him to this day. When he's healthy, he's as strong as they come, Chris Ochoa said. No comp picks coming for the recent coaching hires. You have to have somebody hired to be a head coach elsewhere. You can't just be hired away to be an assistant coach. What makes McCaffrey great is what makes Jerry Rice elite, his work ethic. Yeah, both of those guys, absolutely maniacal. Eric Gomes likes Mitchell. Hard not to like him. They nicknamed Mitchell Drano because he's always able to find the hole. He's a good runner. So they call him Drano. Unfortunately, those injuries did really hurt him, and they have hurt him ever since that first season. What improvements can Shanahan implement into his coaching? I think the biggest improvements might come this season through a defensive coordinator that he's on a better page with, that he trusts more than Steve Wilks, because I think that means less attention needed to be paid from Kyle Shanahan to the other side of the ball, and he could focus more on offensive adjustments and counter adjustments. I thought that, the whole, it's really, really crazy how the entire Steve Wilks saga went down. But I think that at the end of the day, Shanahan might have been a little too sure of his own defense and the talent there and the system they had built, that he thought they could hire anyone, bring him in, and it would be fine. And he just wanted a veteran play caller who might be able to give the 49ers a little bit more on the second level and the secondary. But other than that, he didn't expect a drop off from the front seven, but there was a drop off. So Shanahan needs to be a little bit more prescient in situations like that. And that's not as much of a coaching error as it was a management flaw for Shanahan. As far as coaching goes, and this goes back to management too, because both of these things are so intertwined. if you're Shanahan, you've got to find a way to develop better pass protection, especially on the right side. That is what is going to allow Brock Purdy the margin for error to take his game to completely stratospheric levels. And they already were, he was already performing pretty damn well this year. And we're talking number one efficiency despite pass protection ranked in the 20s. Fortify that line. And if Shanahan can focus on fortifying that line, everything is going to be easier. And that's a weakness that the 49ers can definitely fix. Being Butterfly says that Kyle Shanahan needs to improve his situational awareness. He needs to better understand how to apply analytics to the situation of the game. I think sometimes he applies them just fine and sometimes he doesn't. I think there's some inconsistency there from Shanahan. So I guess that you're correct. Situational awareness is something that would be the umbrella under which that falls. Any update on Nick Zakelj? I talked to Nick before the Super Bowl. He's doing great. Had surgery on the I think it was a torn biceps muscle that he suffered that ended his season. Still roommates with Brock Purdy. They've got a nice spot. No more Alfredo Gutierrez in the spot. He wasn't roommates with them anymore this season. And Nick Zakelj is aiming to be back and compete to give the 49ers some interior offensive line depth next year. The chances of Richard Sherman as the defensive coordinator, at least right now, are slim to none. He's making way more money on TV. He enjoys that. We know Richard loves talking. I don't think that he wants the stress of a coaching job like a DC job right now. Kevin Butler thinks that fortifying the line means that Brock will throw over 5,000. Some Drew Brees kind of stuff there, huh? Talking about reputation repair quarterbacks, that might make sense, what Roddy Cal said. First, you had Sam Darnold, then you could bring Mac Jones in, and then you could bring whoever else in. It's not the craziest thought in the world. Finally, those prognosticators will have been right about the 49ers signing Mac Jones. No update on Danny Gray. He's going to have to be back next year, and he'll have to try to earn a spot. He's been healthy for a long time, just didn't ever break through this year. So training camp is going to be huge. The offseason is going to be huge for Danny Gray. All right. There we go. 37 minutes. That's good. I'm very tired. I've traveled cross country. We're not letting the streak die, though. Another show, more content for you. It's what it's all about. I try to make as much of this as possible. So that way, it seems that people are starting to move on from the Super Bowl. That's great. But I'm trying to help with that and also get you excited for the off season. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you very, very soon.